And how many people here are from Nepal? Besides Marina? None. Okay, so I'm gonna just talk about Nepal and just add something new to the table that I hope you guys can take away and learn something from a country that sends migrant workers abroad as opposed to Hong Kong, which receives migrant workers. So this is just a different perspective. So this image right here, this is by a Nepali artist, a very good friend. It is an image, I chose this image because it's an image of the widow of a migrant worker. Her husband died in Saudi Arabia, where a lot of migrant workers have to work in very stressful, harsh conditions. And this image speaks a lot because this is one of the most commonly held narratives in Nepal of women, that they are the ones who stay behind as their husbands go abroad for work. So for hundreds of years, this is not our photo, I downloaded it. So for hundreds of years, Nepali men have been going out to work as Gurkha soldiers. You have a lot of them here in Hong Kong as well. And while the men left, the women stayed behind with the children and took care of the family while the men sent money back home. I forgot to add the name of the image you saw in the beginning. That was part of a collection, an exhibition. And the name of the collection was I Have to Feed Myself, My Family, and My Country. So this photo kind of just ties into that image, in that migrant workers, the amount of money they send home to Nepal makes up 23% of our economy. So a migrant worker is not only feeding himself and his family, but is also giving a lot back to the country. So a lot of, in popular culture in Nepal, there is a lot of songs, a lot of films, a lot of imagery around this separation between the man and his wife, or the family and the man. There's a lot of movies, there's a lot of pain, nostalgia created by this situation out there. But for the past 30 years or so, it is changed in Nepal. People are not only leaving as soldiers, but now they're leaving as laborers, as migrant workers. And for the past 20 years, it is now women who are joining the labor force that go abroad to work. The women, mostly because they are the most vulnerable group, because they come from very impoverished backgrounds. They're unskilled, illiterate, and very easy to be in an exploitative situation because they work as domestic workers in people's homes, which is, completely unorganized labor. Men are more visible, they work outside, but women are all locked up inside. So we didn't really know what was happening for a while. And so after women started leaving to go abroad, stories started coming back of exploitation, of abuse. Women started returning back physically and mentally abused. And so, civil society in Nepal started kind of putting a lot of pressure on the Nepali government to do something about this situation. A lot of our women are coming back in a terrible state. Let's do something about it. And the government's answer to that was to kind of put a blanket ban on migration. So women only above a certain age could migrate as domestic workers. Under that age, they couldn't. And this was not really the solution, This just gave birth to illegal ways of going out there to make money. And eventually they had to lift that ban. But these two narratives were basically the dominant narrative that exists in Nepal about women migrants. The one who stays behind while her husband goes to work, or the one who goes abroad to work herself and then is heavily abused or exploited. And we knew that there was more out there, that these were not the only two narratives. I lived abroad for almost 15 years, and this subject of migration and this feeling of impermanence you have as a migrant really fascinated me, and I based a lot of my work around that. You know, I met Vivian 10 years ago now, 11 years ago now, in Amsterdam, and we started, the first project we did was with women migrant workers. They were, no, not migrant workers, they were asylum seekers. And then we continued on working with sex workers, migrant workers, you know, all kinds of different groups of women with second generation, third generation migrant children. And so these stories started coming out of a single mother and what she has to do to raise a child in a country that's not hers, and where she has no help, you know, no support. The story of a sex worker who sends all her money back home so people back home have a house to live in, while she has nothing at all. She keeps nothing for herself. You know, a story of a second generation young girl who's really battling with her identity about who she is, you know, where does she fit in, these stories. So kind of having these in my head, these narratives in my head, we started working with, we can go next. Oh, sorry, we can continue. I was supposed to tell you to move. Yeah, go on. Okay. Okay, maybe I'll talk about the images now and then I'll tell you where to stop. You want to come back? So this image was in our workshop with returning migrant workers in Nepal. They wanted to reenact a situation of abuse, you know, of being beat by the people that they worked for. So they chose to do it via a shadow. This image was also by the returning migrant group in Nepal, of, you know, the skills they have to learn so they can go abroad and work. This is an image of a girl coming back from living abroad. You know, she's being helped by security personnel in the airport because she's obviously very traumatized. And this is often a case we see in Kathmandu airport. So this was supposed to be the image as I talked about us in Amsterdam. Go on. Okay, so here we start basically. So then in Nepal, VOW Media, we started working with returning migrant workers, and we started this project called Desh to Bidesh, which, like, loosely translated in English means from your homeland to a foreign land. And the women did, we worked with about 30 different women, and they did a photography workshop. So this was one of the images of a migrant worker coming to a shelter in Kathmandu before they can kind of go back, be reintegrated back home, because they're not in the situation where they can go back home. Yeah. So after the photography workshop, we did a video workshop, and in the video workshop, we went through various processes of conceptualizing, and one of the things we did to conceptualize a story was, in one of the sessions, I said, okay, write a letter as if you're still at your workplace, like wherever you're working, like write a letter as if you're writing to your family back in Nepal. And this is just a small part of the letter. Does everybody read English? And I can read the Nepali part, so you guys just hear what it sounds like. Yeah? So this is just a part of the letter. It says, तर यहाँ काम काम मात्र भन्ने, जहिले पनि गाली गर्ने, पिट्ने, कुट्ने, खान नदिने, राति राम्रोसँग सुत्न नदिने गर्न लागे। चिसोमा भाडा कपडा धुँदा यी हातहरू शून्य र बेलुन जस्तै हुन्छ। कामको चापले गर्दा मेरो दिमाग खलबलिन्छ। साउनीले कराउँदा कानको जाली फुटे जस्तो भान हुन्छ। This was a very painful bit of writing, and in our workshop, as we tried to make the video, we had sessions where everybody would be constantly in tears because of all the stories that was coming out. It was a very painful experience. But when we finally came to, okay, this is what the film is going to be about, the women said, you know, So we want to make this film for young women who are trying to migrate, who are trying to go abroad. That's our target audience. That's who we want to make the video to. And the theme of our video is going to be about how to migrate, like what they should do before they migrate, skills they need to learn. You know, please find out the country you're going to and the job that you're going to be doing, and perhaps get some trainings in the job, and perhaps learn a little bit of the language in the place where you're going to. So the point I'm trying to get to is that when the women themselves chose to speak, it was not to discourage migration, but rather to encourage safe migration, you know, which was a very different narrative than when others were speaking on their behalf. The women didn't say, don't go abroad, you know, it's hard work and it's very, you know, all these terrible things will happen to you, but it was like, learn a few things, you know, become a stronger person and then go abroad. Don't do it as a desperate act of wanting to get some work. And I think that's really important here, is that that's when women themselves have the power to kind of tell their own story and narrate their own issues, then it becomes, migration becomes an empowering act and not like a victimizing act. And that's basically what I wanted to say.